Russia's war effort is being pushed toward a breaking point. Now, that's not just a prediction. It's what happens when a perfect storm descends on Moscow. Right now, the very foundation of Russia's war machine is cracking, not on the battlefield, but in the banks and on the balance sheets. Three critical factors are converging to push Putin's war economy to the absolute brink. Devastating drone attacks are hammering its energy exports. A new wave of U.S. sanctions is choking its access to foreign cash. And maybe most importantly, its supposed ally, China, is starting to get cold feet. For years, Russia's oil and gas infrastructure wasn't just an economic engine. It was a weapon and the piggy bank for its military. Today, that lifeline is under a systematic and surprisingly effective attack. Ukraine has launched a sophisticated drone campaign aimed right at the heart of Russia's energy sector. These aren't random pings. This is a calculated strategy designed to dismantle Russia's ability to both fund and fuel its war. And it's working. The scale of this campaign is massive. Between August and November 2025, Ukraine launched at least 58 attacks on key Russian energy sites, hitting oil refineries. Hard reports for 2025 indicate over 60 drone strikes have hit a significant number of Russia's 38 major refineries. At its peak, these attacks have knocked out an estimated 17% to 21% of Russia's entire refining capacity. The night of November 11, 2025, showed a dramatic escalation. Coordinated attacks hit deep inside Russia, proving just how far and how precise these drones have become. One of the main targets was the Saratov oil refinery, about 600 kilometers from the front line. Explosions and a massive fire took over the facility, which produces fuel crucial for both military and civilian cars. This wasn't a one-off. It was the seventh attack on the Saratov refinery in 2025 alone, a clear sign of a persistent and successful campaign. That same night, other drones flew even farther, striking the Orsk Nefteorg-Syntez refinery in the Orenburg region, some 1,400 kilometers from Ukraine. Early reports suggest a direct hit on a primary refining unit, the heart of its operations. This facility is a major producer of aviation fuel for Russia's Air Force. At the same time, another strike hit the JSC Marine Oil Terminal in Feodosia, Crimea, a critical sea-based supply hub for Russian forces in southern Ukraine. So, what does this actually mean for the front lines? It's simple. A military runs on fuel. Tanks, trucks, and artillery all run on diesel jets, and helicopters burn through aviation kerosene. Cut off the supply, and you constrain the army. When a refinery goes down, it starts a chain reaction. Fuel production drops, shortages begin, and the military is forced to ration. That means slower troop movements, fewer air sorties, and a general decline in readiness. This is no longer a hypothetical problem. It's creating real-world limits on Russia's military operations. And the effects are hitting home. The damage to refineries has triggered fuel shortages across Russia. Since August 2025, reports of shortages have come from over 10 regions. Gas stations have had to close down entirely, sometimes for weeks. This has caused prices to spike and forced the Kremlin into desperate moves, like banning gasoline exports and postponing maintenance at healthy refineries. A risky bet that could lead to more problems down the road. For one of the world's largest oil producers, Russia is starting to look like a gas station without any gas. In late 2025, the U.S. Treasury rolled out a powerful new tool: the threat of secondary sanctions. This wasn't just about blocking Russian companies' assets in the U.S. The real power is the threat to cut off any foreign bank or company from the U.S. financial system if they do significant business with sanctioned Russian firms. This is what makes the current situation so different. The walls aren't just closing in on Russia, they're closing in on anyone who helps them. Suddenly, financial institutions in countries Russia was using to get around sanctions are facing a stark choice: do business with Russia and risk financial ruin, or walk away. It's not a hard choice for most of them. The effects were immediate and sent a chill through global energy markets. In Iraq, operations at a major oil field run by a Russian company were suspended after the country froze all payments. In Europe, Bulgaria moved to take state control of its largest refinery, owned by a Russian firm, while the future of other Russian-owned assets in Romania and the Netherlands is now in question. The threat of secondary sanctions is clearly being taken seriously. For Russia, the financial fallout has been severe. With fewer and fewer buyers, it's been forced to sell its crude oil at the biggest discounts in years. By early November 2025, the discount for Russian Urals crude against the Brent international benchmark had widened to nearly $20 per barrel. That's a direct hit to the revenue stream. Moscow needs to fund a budget where military spending has swollen to nearly 8% of GDP, a level not seen since the late Soviet era. Even top Russian officials are starting to admit the pressure. In a rare moment of honesty, on November 10th, German Gref, the CEO of Russia's biggest bank, Sberbank, told Vladimir Putin directly that the bank was seeing only very modest growth. He admitted that the economy in 2025 was performing worse than expected. Hearing that from a top state banker is a major crack in the Kremlin's facade of a stable, resilient economy. These crises are all starting to connect, creating a feedback loop that is pushing Russia's economy toward a breaking point. Throughout the war, Russia has counted on one crucial lifeline to survive Western pressure. Its no-limits partnership with China-Beijing became the #1 buyer for Russian oil and a key supplier of goods for the war effort. But that pillar is now showing serious cracks. And for the Kremlin, its instability might be the most dangerous development of all. The new U.S. secondary sanctions have put Beijing in a tough spot. While China may share Moscow's desire to challenge the West, its banks and companies are woven into the global economy. They simply aren't willing to be cut off from the U.S. dollar to help a partner. As a result, Chinese firms are quietly, but quickly, backing away from the risk. After the sanctions were announced, reports emerged that major state-owned Chinese refiners, like Sinopec and PetroChina, began scaling back shipments of Russian oil. One of China's largest inland refiners, Yanchang Petroleum, reportedly dropped Russian oil entirely from its purchase plans for the winter, a big deal for a company that had been a regular buyer. This isn't just a small adjustment, it's a significant retreat that could affect a huge portion of Russia's crude exports to China. India, the other major destination for Russian oil, has also grown much more cautious, with reports of major refiners becoming wary of new orders due to the sanctions risk. This whole situation exposes just how one-sided the Russia-China relationship is. For Russia, Chinese support is a matter of survival. For China, Russia is a useful partner, but ultimately not an essential one. Chinese companies will take advantage of the situation, but they won't risk their own economic interests for an alliance. The threat of U.S. sanctions has effectively called China's bluff, and Moscow is learning that its most important ally will always look out for itself first individually. Any one of these pressures, the drone attacks, the sanctions, the Chinese pullback, would be a major headache for Russia. But the real problem is that they're all hitting at the same time and feeding each other. Russia has been good at adapting and finding workarounds. But the system is now fighting a multi-front economic war. It's just not built for. Think about the cycle it creates. A Ukrainian drone hits a refinery. To fix it, Russia needs Western parts or Chinese replacements. But secondary sanctions make it nearly impossible to get those parts. At the same time, the damaged refineries can't export as much, which cuts into revenue. And the revenue Russia does get from crude oil is shrinking because the few remaining buyers, like China and India, are demanding huge discounts. It's a downward spiral. Russia can't afford to fix its economic engine because the engine itself is what generates the money. The war economy, which stayed afloat thanks to high energy prices and sanctions dodging, is now facing a crisis. GDP growth has stalled, and inflation won't go away. The whole system is becoming more fragile and much more vulnerable to a sudden shock. What we are witnessing is the systematic weakening of the pillars that have propped up Russia's war for nearly 4 years. The drone campaign is no longer a nuisance. It's a strategic threat that's damaging Russia's fuel supply and export capacity. The new U.S. sanctions aren't just symbolic. They're a financial chokehold that is actually scaring off Russia's economic partners. And China's shift from a supposed ally to a cautious, self-interested player removes the final safety net. The foundation of Russia's war machine is cracking. The combination of physical destruction, financial isolation, and geopolitical abandonment is creating that perfect storm. The Kremlin strategy was built on the idea that it could outlast its opponents, but that strategy is now being tested like never before. The question is no longer if Russia's war economy will face a reckoning, but when, and what happens when it finally does.